Every day, behind these bars, time becomes a battle between survival and desperation. Prepare to immerse yourself in 10 prisons where hope is a luxury for a few and every moment can mean the difference between life and oblivion. Hold on tight. What you are about to see will make you question everything you thought you knew about prisons. I remind you, for those who have not yet done so, to subscribe to the channel. Your support is important. Let's get started. Rikers Island, New York, USA. Rikers Island is located on an island between Queens and the Bronx, and is one of the largest detention facilities in the United States. It houses people awaiting trial or already convicted of crimes of various seriousness. In recent years, numerous investigations have highlighted problems related to overcrowding, situations of tension between inmates and prison staff, and the lack of resources for psychological support. The common areas, often crowded, generate a climate of nervousness in which conflicts can explode. Added to this is the difficulty of carrying out profound reforms, despite the existence of recovery and education programs. The issue of riots, although not frequent, remains a very delicate aspect. When they break out, the response of those who manage the prison must be rapid to prevent the violence from getting out of control. Escapes, on the other hand, are rare due to the isolated position and the constantly monitored bridge. Rikers Island, for better or for worse, represents a synthesis of some contradictions of the American prison system. San Quentin, California, USA. From the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States, San Quentin is one of the oldest prisons in the country. Its walls, overlooking the San Francisco Bay, have seen criminals of all kinds pass through, some of whom have become infamous. Despite having been at the center of innovations in education and prison reform, problems of overcrowding and tensions between groups of prisoners remain. The unforgettable are remembered as a turbulent time, marked by riots and protests that forced authorities to introduce new security measures. Today, San Quentin continues to be a place where the climate can become tense, especially in areas where different internal factions intersect. However, the stories of inmates who manage to study or undertake rehabilitation programs demonstrate that even in such a difficult context, there can be hope for change. Gitaramak Prison, Rwanda. We moved to Africa, where Gitarama Central Prison in Rwanda, known as Hell on Earth, is often cited for its extreme overcrowding and poor infrastructure. Cells designed for a few dozen people house many more, putting a strain on the physical and mental health of the inmates. In such critical conditions, even the provision of essential goods such as drinking water or medical care is insufficient. Tensions can erupt into sudden clashes, while the lack of adequate resources slows down any attempts at improvement. Literacy programs and small re-education initiatives exist, but the results are often undermined by the high rate of conflict and management difficulties. Karama reflects the complexity of managing a prison system in a context where funding and support structures are lacking. Diyarbakir Prison, Turkey. Diyarbakir Prison in Turkey has repeatedly attracted international attention, especially for its handling of political prisoners and for conditions that are considered harsh. Overcrowding and restrictions on freedom of movement contribute to a stressful atmosphere. There have been reforms nationwide, but testimonies from those who have lived in Diyarbakir indicate that several critical issues remain. Some inmates complain about a harsh disciplinary regime and isolation that undermines their will to resist. Over time, protests and unrest have pushed the authorities to take action, but according to some observers, there is still a long way to go to align with international standards. Diyarbakir, therefore, remains a symbol of how penitentiary systems, especially in times of strong political tension, can become very rigid instruments of social control. Mendoza Prison, Argentina. In Mendoza, Argentina, overcrowding and difficult living conditions are the subject of much debate. Small, poorly ventilated cells, limited food and water supplies, and a lack of adequate re-education programs create an environment where daily life is extremely challenging. Internal tensions, fueled by the influence of gangs and criminal groups, can lead to violent episodes. Local authorities have implemented some interventions to decongest the facility, but the problem remains serious and requires long-term solutions. Sometimes the prisoners themselves try to assert their rights through forms of protest, but the lack of adequate resources limits the possibility of radical change. Mendoza thus becomes an example of the challenges that South America faces in trying to make prisons places not only of punishment, but also of possible recovery. Sabana Venezuela. In the city of Maracaibo, Venezuela, La Sabana has been repeatedly described as one of the most difficult prisons in Latin America. Overcrowding reaches extreme levels, and several episodes of internal disorder have attracted the attention of humanitarian associations. La Sabana has historically shown a notable lack of control, leaving room for perennial tensions among prisoners. One of the most frequently cited cases is a revolt that occurred in the Unión of Inhabited, which had very serious consequences. In the years that followed, attempts were made to improve the situation with various reform initiatives, but the overall environment remains extremely fragile. Some local organizations are trying to launch educational and assistance projects, but difficulties in coordinating permanent structural interventions remain. La Sabana bears witness to the effects of a prison management that lacks both funding and a long-term strategy. Bangkok, Thailand. Near Bangkok, Bangkok Prison is known for its strict rules and so-called maximum security regime. In the past, inmates were subjected to very strict restrictions, including the use of shackles. Over time, thanks also to international pressure, these practices have been relaxed, but the facility remains particularly rigid in applying the rules. Here, people serving long prison sentences and those awaiting the outcome of possible legal appeals live side by side. Some describe Bangkok as a place where time passes slowly, with little prospect of redemption. Reform projects have been launched, but overcrowding and limited budgetary resources hinder significant interventions. As a result, Bangkok continues to be seen as a prison that exemplifies the severity of the Thai prison system. Field Quarterdisi, North Korea. Camp Quarterdisi is probably the most enigmatic and inaccessible of all. According to very limited testimonies, it is a political re-education camp where forced labor and strict surveillance are the norm. The little information comes from rare individuals who manage to leave the country, which makes it difficult to independently verify the reality of the facts. It is often described as a context in which even expressing a contrary opinion can be considered an act of rebellion. The authorities would control every aspect of daily life, and entire families could remain inside the camp for generations. The impenetrability of North Korea makes it almost impossible to conduct thorough investigations. Camp Quarterdisi therefore remains a sort of symbol of how harsh and secretive a detention environment can be in an isolated political system. Cresty Prison, Russia. Located in St. Petersburg, Cresty Prison is famous for both the unusual cross-shaped layout of its cells and the overcrowding that has marked its history. Designed in the U-9th century, over time it has found itself housing many more inmates than it could handle, generating tension and discomfort. Despite announcements of modernization and transfers of prisoners, Cresty remains a symbol of the challenges of the Russian prison system. Belmarsh, UK. Belmarsh is a maximum security prison near London, known for holding high-profile inmates, including terrorists and notorious hackers. Its surveillance measures are among the most stringent in the country, with a strict regime to ensure internal security. While it has been praised for its rehabilitation programs, it has also been criticized for the level of isolation imposed on the most dangerous inmates. Each of these 10 prisons presents critical issues and complexities specific to the context in which it is located. In some, the political aspect dominates. In others, structural deficiencies or internal tensions prevail. What emerges is a picture of structures in which living conditions are often at the limit, and where opportunities for social reintegration are limited. Calls for reform and greater transparency remain a recurring theme, along with the difficulty of combining public safety with respect for human dignity. Some of these entities have made small steps forward, introducing education programs or improving infrastructure. However, many challenges remain, including combating overcrowding, preventing internal tensions, and finding adequate resources. Observing these prisons means reflecting on how complex penitentiary systems are and how thin the lines can be between justice, punishment, and the need to not forget the fundamental rights of every individual. For many, unfortunately, life behind bars remains a daily struggle, devoid of those perspectives that a balanced prison system should, in theory, offer. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey among some of the most controversial and feared prisons in the world. We hope we have offered you food for thought and a new point of view on the complex universe of the prison system. If you liked the video and want to stay updated, subscribe and activate notifications. See you soon, and thank you for your precious support.